Hi everyone, welcome to the NC Marriage.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Steve. And thanks everyone for being so patient. We've been taking our time recording our next podcast to share with you because the US election's just finally finished. We know that it's been a deeply divisive time, not just in the US but across the world. And here in Australia we're deeply invested in what happens in the United States. We know that it's a very important time for us all to stay calm and stay really unified with each other. For that reason we've come together today to make this podcast. Kim has been writing about the problems with families and about the solutions with families as well for the last 13 years, focusing on various subjects that are helping people get their family to a point where they can work together, make decisions together, balance power. And today, balancing power is really what we'd like to be talking to everybody about. And Kim, you've written a whole heap of notes here for us to talk about today, which is really exciting for us because the US election has brought up a lot of division, and okay, some of that's going to dissipate over the next few weeks. And
we hope.
Well, let's fingers crossed. And I think we're all a little bit wary of where this might be going. We can't expect, and Kim's last article was about how we can't expect a hero to save us, and we talked a lot about that, and Kim wrote a lot about how expecting a hero to come in and save us is really not a very intelligent way to deal with the crises and the conflict and the anxiety that we're facing at the moment. So one of the ways we can overcome that anxiety is by focusing on balancing power within our families.
Well, it's what works.
And we're in
waiting for a hero is probably going to leave you high and dry.
And we're in charge of our family. We were talking earlier, Kim, about how I think it's really important to know that we have the power in our family to change. You were mentioning earlier that to be able to balance the power in our families is the beginning point, and it should also be the end goal as well.
Well, it's been proven to be the only means of creating peace and prosperity, not just in families, but in any organization. And I have been writing about balancing power and the need for families to organize themselves better and work more professionally, I guess, on their organizational structure and the way they make decisions and the way they make sure that everyone in a family's needs are considered and met. But then I just woke up yesterday and I realized that I don't think I've really drilled down and talked enough about why that's important. The latest article that I've written that I'm hoping may develop into a new book if I get enough interest in it. I've dealt with some subjects in that article that aren't maybe necessarily what people want to face, of actually examining our own belief systems and why we believe what we believe. I think that people are so busy these days trying to slaughter each other's sacred cows that it's become even more uncomfortable than it is normally to actually examine our own beliefs and where they come from and if they really hold up to scrutiny in the light of day. Now, I know that's challenging, and so far it's been a topic that's been difficult to get people to comment on or engage with, which I do understand, and maybe it's not something that people are ready for. But I really need to state that the article or the short book is not about me so much challenging other people's deeply held beliefs. It's a personal story about my journey in overcoming PTSD by exploring my own beliefs and my willingness to look at those beliefs in the light of day and trust myself and trust my own conscience and trust what I've learned about emotional intelligence to guide me through that to a place where thankfully at the moment in our family we are feeling very stable and very secure and ready to face what's ahead of us in the future. And I don't want to sort of come across like Chicken Little that's just constantly saying, hey, the sky is falling. But I have seen this coming for a long time. The idea that our personal liberty and our ability to make decisions for ourselves in regards to business and our personal lives is under threat. I didn't necessarily see the pandemic coming, and I'm not claiming that, but I just think as a general trend, people are certainly becoming less free, and there is a war that is continued of big business against small business, where small business usually ends up the loser. And that is certainly challenging for people such as ourselves who are entrepreneurial and work in small business. So we're certainly not out of the woods. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us, like many people in the world now have challenges. All I can say is to just keep reiterating the real necessity and the real urgency, accepting our differences and balancing power in our homes in a way where we can work together effectively to find a way forward and deal with the threats that are facing us as individuals. But today, I would like to just drill down and talk more about why balancing power is important and why it is that it is really the only means of creating peace and prosperity.
Kim, you mentioned that there are wider threats that are present at the moment, and I think we should get back to that. But first of all, we're talking about balancing power in the home. Obviously, respecting different viewpoints is an incredibly important skill to learn. I mean, it is a skill, surely, respecting other people's viewpoints within a family or within a political landscape. How do we get to that point where we're respecting different viewpoints when we're so encouraged to be polarized and against each other so often?
And to compete with each other. Well, I think that comes back to equality. And equality is a difficult word because what does equal mean? Does it mean that we all have the same talents, that we all have the same usefulness, that do we all have the same means and resources available to us? Of course we don't. Equality as relates to this is about respect, as you've mentioned, Steve, and it's whether there's a process in place in your family or any organization that you're a part of where everyone's needs are considered and where people's concerns are going to be heard and are going to be addressed. That's about equality when you want to talk about equality in power. Because if you have a situation where some people's needs are seen as more important than other people's needs, for instance, the big banks versus homeowners in the big collapse that happened, when was it, 2009, where the big banks' needs were seen to be more important than the individual homeowners' needs. So there you have an imbalance of power, you have an inequality in the system where the system is supporting one entity's needs over another's needs. And the simple fact is that whenever that exists in any kind of organization, it is going to be abused and it is going to be exploited. And not only is it going to create unfair outcomes in the present time, but it's going to spiral downwards and create a culture of oppression.
Right, so we know that the Stanford prison study actually proved that beyond doubt that whenever you create an imbalance amongst people, that that imbalance will spiral down. It seems to be an innate feature of our humanity that that's where we go. So working on productive working relationships within families seems to be possibly our only hope.
Well, the Stanford prison experiment is a really good example of that. We might cut to just a short trailer of that movie that they made about that experiment.
Would you rather be a guard or a prisoner? I don't think I have the qualities to be a guard.
Prisoner.
Prisoner, I guess.
Prisoner sounds like it would be a little less work.
Prisoner.
Why's that?
Nobody likes guards.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This experiment will be an extension of my research into the effects prisons can have on human behavior.
You're going to be pleased to know that you all have been chosen to be the prison guards.
But under no circumstances whatsoever are you to physically assault the prisoners in any way. So remember, just as you were watching the prisoners, my graduate staff and I will be watching you.
All right, gentlemen, we're gonna have ourselves a lot of fun.
Rule number 1, prisoners must remain silent.
This is an exercise period.
Okay, is it just me, or are these guys taking this thing a bit too seriously?
Why don't you give me 20 push-ups?
Look at this guy. Thinks he's John Wayne or something.
You address me as Mr. Correctional Officer.
This might be an interesting 2 weeks after all.
Why don't you make up your bunk, 8612?
I did, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Well, that's not what I see.
Hey, what are you doing? It's just me now!
What was that?
You just hit him. You're not supposed to hit him.
Should we step in?
No. Let the guards figure it out. Let's see where it goes.
Good evening, gentlemen. How about we make this one a night to remember?
This is all real. They won't let you go. They won't let us leave.
Those are not prisoners. Those are not subjects. Those are boys, and you are harming them.
Please! Let me out of here! I want out! I want out now!
You thought you were gonna get some playtime in the yard, boy? Is that what you thought this was gonna be?
I had no idea it would turn out this way.
There's all sorts of evidence for this. We only have to look at history to see that this is what happens when there isn't equal power given to people, power in terms of their right to be heard or have their needs addressed and their concerns addressed. In the article below, Prince Charming's Dirty Secret, this is the means by which I hope you'll take the time to read my short book or longer article, whichever you want to put it. But, you know, even if you just want to scroll through and jump forward to what Prince Charming's Dirty Secret is, I'm not going to give it away here. But it's a very murderous and very real dirty secret that's operated for thousands of years on this planet and has basically guaranteed that we have a culture where marriage isn't equal, where there is a sense of inequality in marriage, where men are expected to be a little bit older, a little bit smarter, a little bit wealthier, have higher social status than their wife. Common women are waiting for their prince. And there's a system in place that's actually guaranteed this, which I hope you will look into and find out what it is, because when I discovered it, I was really horrified. This is something that we really need to become aware of, that just highlights the call that I've been making for years now for families to get organized, to balance power in our own homes, to understand that the idea of men being higher in the hierarchy in their family than women, which is often seen as a means of creating peace, you know. Oh, well, if there's clearly somebody in charge, well, there won't be as many arguments. Well, you know, again, back to the Stanford prison experiment, it just doesn't work that way. If you create a culture where men traditionally feel like they need to have that position of higher authority in their homes, and where they should have more of a say in decision making and whatever, it's going to create abuse. And just as in the Stanford prison experiment, And we've seen this happen in the world where, domestic violence and where conflict in families is now the number one reason for police call-outs in this country and probably other countries, something like 60% of police call-outs. Now, this is a really huge problem. We need to stop and we need to readdress this. And it's not addressed by women saying that they have more rights than men. It's about balance. It's about actually saying, okay, how are decisions made in our families? How are resources allocated? How are conflicts resolved? What is the process in our family to ensure that everybody's heard and everybody's needs are met and that everybody's needs are being respected?
Well, it's been a tough journey for you and I. Our relationship was facing obliteration many years ago, and against all odds, we're able to establish some kind of facility for us to bargain and negotiate with each other and actually agree on some things and cooperate. We're a large family, our children are all grown up now. But it wasn't necessarily an easy road.
No.
Right. It's not.
And
we're not
sometimes
offering an easy solution here.
And sometimes you gotta fight. Sometimes you do have to fight for peace, because if you're not being heard, if you're not being listened to, if your needs are not being considered, if your concerns are not being addressed, well, there's a problem, and you really need to rethink how your family's structured and how you're going to reorganize things so that happens. And just insisting on it because what somebody else is doing is hurting you or upsetting you isn't going to work. And it doesn't work at a political level, and it doesn't work on a level of families. If the money in your family isn't being shared equally, well, maybe it's time that you separate bank accounts and make sure that you protect your money. If you're not being heard, or your needs or concerns are being gaslighted, where you're just being told that you're crazy and that you're too demanding, or that you're what's the big one with older women now, particularly older white women, that we're entitled and bossy and rude. And I think this is an extremely dangerous trend, because in Australia at the moment, women over 50 is the largest growing demographic of homeless people in Australia. I don't know what it's like in other places in the world, but any kind of cultural movement that's actually really discouraging women from speaking up or complaining or feeling like they've got a right to have their opinion heard or their needs put forward, this is not healthy. This is not reflective of what's actually going on.
That's right. There's a definite and concerted effort by the media, news media in particular, to make us want to dislike each other. It's actually a very good business model for them. It actually gets people agitated and riled up to take action, to click on the link, to purchase the paper or to purchase a subscription. The business model of the news now is to turn us against each other. And it's not a conspiracy. It's actually well founded by a lot of wonderful researchers are putting this position forward very eloquently and with well researched data, that we are under attack by people who just want to sell us things, and the news is one of them. And as you just explained, Kim, I mean, it's very easy to polarize, and I think you might have been talking before about the Karens, who they call the older assertive women. It's older assertive white women are all Karens, right? And it's just a way to minimize what women's role might be in society, where they may be assertive and intelligent enough to demand a better outcome for themselves. And that's minimized by the news media and by the trend makers. And we are poorer for it.
And if you have a look at Prince Charming's Dirty Secret, you'll see that this really ties directly in with an all-out assault that has gone on for thousands of years now against upper class women. And that really needs to be rethought, because in my life I haven't just been a writer. I've had a lot to do with the organic food movement in Australia, and I'm telling you right now that it's upper class women who financed that whole revolution that happened towards growing food organically in the world. Upper class men have got a lot of privilege and a lot of power, and they're complaining to the manager about all sorts of things. And they're running around and they're having their needs met, and they're talking about the way they want things done. And seriously, the people that are closest to those people are the women that are part of that upper class society as well. And disempowering those women is not smart. That is not a smart thing for us to be doing, because those women have traditionally not only been disempowered but often murdered. And if you don't believe that, well, read my article about Prince Charming's dirty secret, because this is really a class war that is going on. And I don't think that many people at this point in history would dispute that there's a class war going on. And we really need to educate ourselves about really the mechanics of how that class war is playing out and how it works. I educate people about this all the time, and the men are so surprised when I say that there's all of these women over 50 who are now becoming, they're called the hidden homeless in Australia. They say, oh, well, I thought that they got the bigger divorce payouts. You know, I thought the men were complaining that they had it wrong. And it's like, no, that isn't what's happening. And even if they do, statistically, the women are much more likely to share that divorce payout with their children, with other people in need that are around them. And this just plays right into the codependent tendency that says, if I'm a good person and I look after everybody else's needs, well, then people are going to consider me and I'm a good person and I'm going to get taken care of. Well, that isn't playing out. That's just not what's happening. A really scary proportion of older women in this country are now left couch surfing and are technically homeless. They've given a really big share of their lives in this codependent way, in saying, I'll put my needs last, I'll put everybody else's needs before mine. They've taken care of their families, they've helped their children get through school, they've supported their husband in their careers, while they've also maintained careers to add to the family income as has been needed. And then as soon as the kids move out, our system just dumps them on the wayside. And this is not a time when those women's voices should be being silenced, or when these women should be told that they should just, not be so entitled and they should just back down. This is really, really urgent for our world community at the moment, because the threats that we're facing are real, and it takes older people in our community to really see the danger in these threats. When we're young, we're a lot more often idealistic and we've got ideas, and yes, we're going to reform society, we've got to make all these great sweeping changes and everything will just be better. Well, by the time you're older, you see that it doesn't often work out the way that you think it's going to.
So that even extends out to the community, not just in the families, in our local community, because we're very easily separated and divided and polarized, very easily. And if we can do it in our families, we can do it in our local communities as well. I mean, we have a common set of objectives within a family. We all want the house to not leak, and we all want to have some food that's in a refrigerator that works. We all want to have freedom of movement and freedom of expression. But even if you widen that out to your local community, which is just your town or your suburb or your local city, it's the same principle. There will be ways in which, if we can work through a productive means of negotiation, that we can find what it is that we would like to achieve for ourselves. And we may need to fight for that. And I think, Kim, you're really on track here, because the evil is very anonymous at the moment. There isn't a defining demagogue that we have to tear down, because it's really an anonymous corporate and government structure that will take us down eventually if we're not careful.
Yeah, because even when the politicians change these days, the bureaucracies that are in the background don't necessarily change. Just because the government changes doesn't mean that the plans change. And we need to come at this from a different mindset. We need to start asking different questions. Not how do we convince other people to believe what we believe, but how do we get along with each other despite our differences in belief? You know, I was very fortunate in some ways. It was very difficult for me for a lot of my life, because I was raised in a home where my father was Republican and my mother was Democrat. And so I had a very confusing worldview for a lot of my life. And for a long time, I didn't even dare talk about politics, because when times are better, people with a moderate viewpoint or understand both sides of politics, which I had the good fortune of being brought up where I just had to understand both sides of it. But most people are seen as wishy-washy or as suspect. Where hopefully, because we've seen where this divide can go and where this extremism can take us, I feel like the landscape's changing a little bit now, and it really is a time when people with a more moderate view on politics, who have taken the time to understand both sides or every side, can find the courage to speak up and put their ideas forward, and hopefully be given a little bit more consideration, because that's exactly the kind of leaders that we need. We actually need leaders that understand every side and are not taking sides, because that's the only way that we're actually going to move forward and be able to make decisions and be able to face the challenges that the world is facing now, whether it's environmental challenges, whether it's health challenges, or whether it's ideological challenges that are bringing into play this kind of surveillance, high-tech, open-air panopticon that the world unfortunately seems to be racing towards, with not many people even knowing where the brakes are.
That's right. And Kim, I want to move on to something, because you've been an outstanding trend forecaster over the years, and I've been with you for nearly 30 years now, and I can vouch and quite honestly say that Kim is extraordinary in being able to predict trends, and I can give you dozens of examples, but I won't go into that now. But one in particular I want to share, and that is the particular threat that you alluded to earlier. There is a wider threat that we're facing at the moment as a global community and as a collection of individual smaller communities across the globe. It's a difficult thing to pin down, because evil moves in anonymous ways these days. There's one particular cluster of thinking that you've identified, Kim, and that is you've narrowed it down to the communitarian movement, which is different to communism, communitarian movement and communitarian law. The baseline of this movement is that the individual's needs are balanced against the needs of the many, and that can be easily oversimplified. It sounds like a progressive type of ideology, but in fact you were talking earlier, Kim, about how it's extremely regressive, how we're facing a threat now at a local level with us as families, and that's a really important thing, because as families we can't change other people's minds very much, but we can protect what we have, and we do that within families in local communities. So can you tell us a little bit about the communitarian movement and communitarian law?
Well, I'm no expert on this, but in a nutshell, the idea is that the individual's needs need to be balanced against the needs of the world community. And really, if you just look at this with any kind of logic, even with just the logic of a 10-year-old, you can see, well, that's never going to work because it's unequal. Like I was mentioning before, you have to have a certain level of equality between different entities before you can balance anything. How can you have the entire world community versus the individual? Well, obviously the individual is always going to lose. And particularly when the world community has become a euphemism for actually government and corporation interests. And this is all being sold to us under, really cool sounding things like sustainability and saving the planet and whatnot. And these are things that I will say I personally believe in. I was brought up an environmentalist in California. That was probably some of the most rigorous indoctrination that I had growing up. And I, of course, still want that. I think that we all think that clean air and clean soil, protecting the planet and protecting wildlife is important. Well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us do. But I just think that we have to be very careful when we have a sustainability movement that it has this underlying ideology of communitarianism, which is really the same ideology that has backed numerous very repressive government regimes around the world in the last 100 years or more. And when really just at its heart there's this impossibility of balancing the individual's needs against the needs of the whole world community. It just can't work like that. Balancing power is something that needs to be taken a lot more seriously than that. Getting back to the basic level that we look at things from, because that is something that we can immediately control. And, yes, we still need to be aware of what's happening in our community. In terms of what planning is being put through at the moment, I don't know about the States, but I know in Australia, if you search for fast-tracking development, you'll just get hundreds and hundreds of results of laws that are being changed and things that are happening where they're really trying to push through a lot of planning very quickly now without due process and without genuine community consultation, and really find out. And if you can't get a hold of those plans, or people aren't showing you what those plans are, you need to be asking why. Why are they not there? Everybody's talking about 2030. Everybody's talking about the goals and objectives that we're heading to. Well, where's the plan? How come we're not being shown these plans? How come these decisions are being made behind closed doors? If you're not aware that there's a problem there, maybe you need to start looking into it more, because there is a problem there. And it's a problem as families, we need to start really taking it seriously in terms of being united and balancing power in our own homes in a way where we get a working relationship happening with each other, where we're able to deal with what we've got ahead of us right now. But unfortunately, I think how we've been educated by a lot of the stories that we've been brought up with and a lot of the Hollywood movies is really quite the opposite of this. It's like we have to get a majority to our point of view, and we need strong leaders that are going to, be the good guys, and they're going to vanquish the bad guys. And then when we all believe the same thing, or when we're all on the same page, well, then there'll be peace, and then there'll be prosperity. The sad fact is that that's just never going to happen.
Right. I mean, what you were touching on there, that there seems to be this concept or idea that perhaps we who feel righteous about what we believe can convince the entire population that we're correct.
Yeah.
and or that my concept should be acknowledged or accepted by others.
And we just have to be more convincing about putting our point of view across. We just have to we have to figure out how to convince the other side.
Right. So where does that go?
Well, trying to convince people of our point of view to gain a majority consensus feels like it's the right thing to do, but unfortunately it just doesn't really work. And what it's really often going to do is just make our opponents who believe something different to us even more entrenched in their position than they were formerly. And so this can really, again, create a downward spiral that people don't anticipate. If we hold on to this idea that the good guy has to win and that there's a right and a wrong way, or there's a good idea and there's a bad idea, and that there needs to be some kind of final victory where the majority of people see things the same way. It all sounds good in theory, but it just actually doesn't really work like that. And we might give more examples of that in our discussion today in terms of balancing power.
So I guess what you're saying, Kim, is that we don't really need to convince everybody of your opinion all the time. That even if we do disagree, there is still room for us to work together.
Yeah, I think the challenge is more to find higher level objectives and goals for ourselves that everybody can agree on, and understand that we're not always going to agree, that there's some things that people are just always going to disagree on, and that's just normal, and that's really not something that we're ever going to be able to do anything about. I think the idea that we need everybody to agree with our way of thinking is really pretty unhealthy.
Sure, absolutely. And it doesn't really fit with what we're trying to achieve, which is to find a cooperative system and a productive means of negotiation within families. So you had an experience many years ago with a friend who was very traditional in his views, and he was very, very, very much against same-sex marriage. Mm-hmm. That was when we had a similar referendum here in Australia about whether or not same-sex marriage should be legalised or permitted. And so you had an interesting exchange with him then. Do you want to share that experience?
He came to visit me. He just retired from being a minister, but he was still feeling very wound up and very like he hadn't sort of finished his crusade in life, and that he still had this calling that he really needed to be out finishing his work. And so that was challenging for me, but I made him a cup of tea and I sat him down and I just, as calmly and politely as I could, explained to him that when it comes to homosexuality and transgenderism and a lot of the things that he was really upset about, that people were always going to be divided on those issues, that there was always going to be people who felt strongly one way or the other, and that, maybe he really could be doing something a little bit more constructive with the last years of his life. Well, sure. I don't know if I actually outright said that to him, but I really did help him see that it was a fight that really wasn't going to go anywhere, that people were always going to be divided on those. And I had a good feeling by the time that he left, and that he'd sort of seemed to be making a few different decisions for himself, that maybe he needed to spend the rest of his time on this planet spending more time looking after his wife and looking after his family, rather than trying to change people's ideas on things that really wasn't ever going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I think forcing your ideology on anybody else isn't really a great idea. I think that's one of the big themes in this recording today.
But it's just in exactly the same way that I'd say to the gay and transgender rights people is that You're never going to have everybody agree with you. You're just not. It doesn't matter what you do. Not everybody is going to see things the way that you see things. And before I get a bunch of hate mail for that, I'm not saying anything about my views on homosexuality or transgenderism in general or rights. I'm just saying this in general for everyone, because it's just the same with religion. There's always going to be people who are against religion. There's always going to be people that are anti-Catholic. There's always going to be people that are anti-Jewish. There's always going to be people that are anti-Protestant. There's always going to be people that are anti-religion in general. There's even always going to be people that are anti-traditional family, because they're going to see that as something that's really staid and oppressive. There's always going to be people that are anti-atheist. It really doesn't matter what the ideology is. It doesn't matter. The point that I'm just trying to make is that we can't be wasting time with the threats that are in front of us at the moment, trying to achieve a consensus that just isn't there and never will be there.
Right. Universal acceptance doesn't seem to be a very good goal to aim towards then.
No.
Because there's a lot of other things to do in the meantime.
And it creates division, and it creates hostility, and it really works completely in the opposite direction of where we need to be heading, which is towards ways and means of working together more peacefully and more cooperatively, and achieving peace and prosperity for ourselves and our families and our communities as a whole, regardless of what everybody feels or believes. And if we want to have any kind of environmental revolution on this planet, if we're going to have any kind of major change towards having a more equal and truly sustainable lifestyle, well, governments and big corporations are the worst people to put in charge of doing that. They're not the people that we want in charge of that. Look at their track record. Like, why would in any way we trust those people to be involved in that process? You know, this is something that really has to start at a genuine grassroots level, at a genuine level of us truly looking at our own family structure, looking at our own community and what's being planned for our own community, seeing the threats that are out there, and really hopefully using that maybe as a basis to come together for husbands and wives to start talking a little bit more honestly and seriously with each other, saying, hey, wow, did you see this? Did you know that this is what's being planned? Did you know that these dangers are ahead for all of us? This isn't a time for us to be protecting our own vices and hiding our little secrets from each other, and, you know, women burying their heads in soap operas and romantic novels, and guys to be hiding away with their porn. And we have to wake up. We have to wake up, because there isn't a hero coming to save us. This is a really big challenge, I know, but, you know, hopefully the greater threats that are outside us now, and if you don't know they're there, well, maybe you need to really start looking at what's being planned for your local community in the next 5 or 10 years. We have to work together. We were put on this planet, I believe, to look after each other. And men being superior or dominant to it, that's not good for men either. Who wants to have to maintain that at home? Steve, what do you feel? I mean, wouldn't you rather have a wife who was your equal? Wouldn't you rather have a wife that challenged you now and then?
Well, that's the dream. The dream is to have equality in your relationship, because then it's really much less hassles in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, even from a selfish point of view, it's much less difficult. If you've got equality, and you've got understanding, and you've got knowledge, and you've got a solid process of how things can get resolved, well, then you're free. You're truly free. You're free inside. You don't have to rely on government or an outside adjudicator to make your life better. You're actually making your life better with every single moment you're alive with somebody that you care about, and you're sharing and you're improving your world with. So for me, it was always a dream to just have someone that we felt like we could work together and we wouldn't have to go through an expensive divorce. Because I've gone through, as a child, I went through an terrible divorce with my parents, and you were the same, Kim. Your parents divorced, and it was an awful thing. And even as a young kid, young man, young boy, I knew that that's what I really wanted. That was the prize. Unfortunately, but it wasn't easy. We didn't get it on a plate because it was very difficult. Once Kim and I started getting together, things became very difficult very, very quickly and escalated quickly between us. But we got on top of it, and that's what most of our books are about. If you haven't already read them,
it's challenging. But when men really realize that they don't have to always be the smartest person in the room, they don't always have to have all the answers, they don't always have to have all the plans sorted out, and that's fine and that's okay. We all need to step up sometimes, and we all need to step down sometimes. What a relief is that, in terms of saying, hey, I can actually just relax. And maybe my job is more creating an environment of trust with my family, where it doesn't take too much time and effort on my part to know what everybody in my family's needs are, to know everybody's point of view, not expect it to always be the same. If you create that open door policy of trust in your family as a man in particular, where your children and your wife and maybe your parents feel like they can come to you when there's a problem, and feel like they can talk to you, and feel like they will have their needs considered and they will have their concerns considered and addressed. They might not always get exactly what they want, but that you're going to provide something much more important than knowledge, which is understanding, that you are going to make the effort to understand your other family's position and needs and situation. Well, that makes your job as leader of the family just so much easier than trying to guess or trying to get that information. Because if you're making decisions without knowing your family's needs, without knowing their real motivations, well, it's never going to go well. It's not going to ever lead to peace and prosperity.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Kim. And I think it's really important that we just provide a little bit of context here. We've been writing about this for many years. The ncmarriage.com, that's our website. And the NC stands for Narcissism and Codependence. And we do live in a narcissistic and codependent world, and our marriages are defined and shaped by that. And without an understanding of that, we really do find ourselves running into brick walls a lot as a family. And that's where our work has been, helping people for nearly 13 years now. So first of all, we'd encourage you to read the article linked below, and that's got a lot of fantastic, we elaborate on a lot of these points that we talked about here. Kim's got some amazing insights to share with you in the article. We'd also like you to go to the ncmarriage.com to have a look. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, but most of all, we'd really love you to comment. If you feel like you've got something to say, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, I've included something at the top saying that anyone who comments might have their comments included when the article becomes a book, and so if you've read that in the past, maybe I'll take that down and change that, because it seems to have scared everyone off commenting. I'm not going to include anybody's comments without their express permission. And look, I know a lot of what I've written here is challenging, and I'm sharing my beliefs after not doing that for a very long time. A lot of people are going to disagree with a lot of what I have to say, but that really isn't the point of the article. The point is just about saying we've got to get past this mattering so much that we disagree on things. We've got to somehow find the courage and the confidence to start talking about what we believe and sharing what we believe, but not in a way where we expect that everybody else is going to agree with us. Hopefully in a way that encourages you, after you've read my article, to feel like, well, maybe you can open up and talk about some of the things that you haven't dared talk about before, about what you believe, that might be completely different to what I believe. And that's good. That's healthy. So can we, just to finish off, Steve, can we talk about my idea of how I think elections should be run?
Yeah, let's give us a rundown on how you think the election should be run. What's your idea?
Well, you liked this idea, and you know a lot more about the Australian electoral system, which sort of works a little bit like what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
But, I think a better election system would be where everybody can vote for as many people as they want to. And so that way the winner is just the person that everybody votes for. And
the common person that everybody wants, the one that everybody chooses in their list of many selections.
Yeah, that's right. So to become the person that everybody votes for, you're going to have to be somebody that actually understands everybody's needs and understands everybody's point of view and is able to come up with policies and goals and objectives that actually align with everyone. And that might sound a bit crazy because we've been conditioned so different from that, but really it shouldn't be that difficult, should it?
Shouldn't. No, I've been thinking it through since you raised it with me, Kim, and I think it's really sensible. And my addition to that idea was to, if let's just say one particular person got the most amount of votes, and that some people in the community, some of the people in the electorate didn't vote for that person, well, they should, at the end of the election, be able to have some kind of connection with the selected party, the selected candidate.
That should be the first person that they have to represent.
Yeah, that's the first port of call for the successful candidate, that he or she says, okay, well, I want to talk to all of those people that didn't vote for me.
Yeah.
I wonder why they didn't vote for me.
Find out
There must
why.
be some reason.
There must be something I'm missing.
Yeah, and obviously I don't have everything that they understand. I've got some understanding wrong that they want to share with me, and that would be a productive process. Well, I guess it could be open to exploitation or whatever, but I think it's a pretty sensible way to do it if everyone's in the spirit of getting what everybody needs. Well, then it probably could work.
It's better leadership, and that means that our leaders would not be able to take sides. Our leaders would have to actually represent everybody. And it's really encouraging to see that Biden's first address to the public has really highlighted that he's representing all of Americans. And I just really hope that that's the truth. He's a politician, so I'm not holding my breath on that.
That's right, and the hard work hasn't happened now. Okay, did the easy thing, voted, and now it's just a matter of making sure that whoever's been elected does the right thing.
I just want to make sure that I haven't left the wrong impression, because that's not how we vote in Australia. But
no, that's right.
we do in Australia. We do have a system where you
must vote for every candidate.
You list in order.
1,
so
2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
You do vote for more than one person, and then the most popular person, even if it's not your first preference, does get through. Does that mean you actually have to vote for everyone? Does it really?
You can vote for somebody last.
Yeah,
okay. There's a particular party I always put last whenever I vote.
Well, I just think the system should be that you should have enough candidates that are popular and you don't have to necessarily vote for everyone.
Right. No, that's right.
But
that's your idea. That's
you
good.
can vote for as many of them as you like, and then the only person that gets through is the one person that, at least one person that everybody has voted for. And even if we can't do this at a high level in politics, I think it's something that you do maybe need to seriously look at in your community organizations, because more and more our community leadership has been taken over by interests that may not be our actual local community. That's another thing I'd encourage you to have a look in and to find out who is actually in charge of and representing your community now in your local power structure, and are those people actually members of your community, and do people in your community actually want those people representing your community? And if not, maybe you do need to put something in place where even for now you put together an alternative community action group or community representatives, that maybe you can try it out, try and vote that way. Just say, okay, who's interested in the job and who wants to do it, and you can only get through if everybody votes for you.
That's good. Well, there's your homework to see what's going on in your local bit. Your homework first is to read the article below. We really want you, and to comment.
So maybe that sounds a bit idealistic, but I don't think it's anywhere near as idealistic as the idea that we're ever going to get everybody to agree with us and believe the same thing.
Amen to
Because
that.
as far as I'm concerned, that's just pie in the sky nonsense. It's not going to happen. We got to get along with each other. That's just it. We're going to disagree. You and I disagree heaps, don't we?
All the time.
But we still got to figure out how we're going to get along with each other and how we're going to work together and how we're going to move forward. Hey, but we've been doing that better and better lately, haven't we?
We have. Give me 5. All right.